Hey, welcome to Gold Scratch. So this video we've been talking about for a while. It's going to be about how the engine gets mounted on the dyno and what can go wrong and what happens when it goes wrong. So we're on the way to Darrell's dyno. It's in Springfield, about a half an hour southeast of here, and we're going to load it up tonight. And Darrell's waiting for us. He's going to actually make a demonstration for us about how he mounted the engine on the dyno and kind of what went wrong. So first of all, building engines is dangerous business. There's lots of things can go wrong, and sometimes we make mistakes, sometimes other people make mistakes, but it doesn't really matter. That's not really important. What's important is we understand what happened, we take proactive, irreversible corrective action to make sure we never make that mistake again, and then we learn from that experience. And if you're watching videos, you can learn from the experience too, because I learned from the experience. So let's back up a little bit. This originally started to be a budget build engine. So what's a budget build? Budget build's an engine we don't take to the machine shop. We do all the prep work at home, and we use mostly stock components, at least in the rotating assembly. Obviously heads are not. So it started life that way, and I sold it to a customer, Paul Phelan. Took it to the dyno 5 weeks ago, and after the initial startup on the dyno, even though it had been run multiple times in my shop without issue, after 5 minutes on the dyno, we went to restart it. It was slow cranking. There's a red flag. Find out why. Don't just keep forcing the issue. Find out what's going on. So we did that. The battery of the dyno was good. Took all the plugs out. It was still hard to turn. I aborted the day. Took the engine back because we knew that something was wrong, and if you force it, if you start it up against its will, you're probably going to do more damage. So what happened, it turned out to be, at first we made a video after that, because we didn't have a dyno video. We made a video of what happened, and I assumed that the problem was I had only set the thrust clearance at 3 thousandths, which is the minimum. 3 to 11 is the allowable tolerance on a small block Chev. And I thought, well, maybe I set it too tight. And we posted that video, and fortunately, Gold Scratch has turned into as much a forum. Smart, knowledgeable, experienced engine builders weigh in. I look for these guys, a lot of these guys, every time I make a video, and they never disappoint me with good, valuable information. And in this case, I stated I must have set the clearance too tight, and a bunch of guys weighed in and said, no, check the dyno. It's got to be caused by the dyno. That shouldn't be a problem. It's very easy to make that mistake, and anything that imparts an excess thrust on that bearing, whether it's the dyno or a manual transmission input shaft pushing on the crankshaft, a bunch of other things it can be, can give you a short life to your thrust bearing. So after being in denial for a while, I finally contacted Darrell and asked him to look into it. He got back to me, he went and checked, and he came back to me in a few minutes and said, I found the problem, it's me, and I'll be happy to fix it for you. And he's going to make a demonstration of, when we get to the dyno today, of exactly what happened. The other thing, it's a different engine now. Paul wanted to use this opportunity to upgrade the engine anyway. So it started to be a budget build. It's not now. Went to a machine shop. I could have actually just rolled out that thrust bearing and rolled another one in, put it back together. It would have run fine. But we didn't do that. We totally disassembled it. Basically, rebuilt it again. We went with hyper-eutectic pistons. We bored it 30 thousandths of an inch. We decked it 25 thousandths of an inch. We now have with the flat top pistons, we now are up to 10.3 or 4 to 1 compression ratio, where it was 9.3 or so before. And we got our quench rate on with the decking the block. And so it's a different engine altogether. We've installed Eagle rods, did a bunch of work on the crankshaft, and basically rebuilt another engine. So it's not a budget build anymore. That's for sure. We still are using the 4/7 swap camshaft that we that was one of the big deals. This dyno session coming this Saturday. This is a Wednesday. Is going to be something to do some R&D with the 4/7 swap camshaft. And we got a bunch of different carburetors and air filters. This leads back to some of my previous videos. How much air does your engine need? We've got a 1-inch breather, a 3-inch breather. We got various different combinations that we're going to use. And you know, you can calculate airflow. You can do flow tests on stuff. But the only thing that matters is how much power it makes. And that's what we're going to find out when we get to the dyno. We're going to start off with Paul's Elderbrock carburetor, but I think Dave Forrest is bringing me a Holly carburetor, and we got a Quadrajet carburetor coming as well, and we're going to try as many accommodations as we can. So watch for that. The next clip will be at Darrell's shop, and he's going to show us what went wrong. Okay, we're here at Darrell's dyno service, Darrell Watters Dyno Service in Springfield, Ontario, and Darrell was waiting for us. So the subject of this video is, you know, things that can go wrong, and sometimes no matter how hard you try to be perfect, things happen. And it's not about blame, it's about finding out what happened, taking corrective actions so it doesn't happen again, and learn something from it. So I'm going to let Darrell take us through the whole process, starting with the engine still in the back of the truck, and then we're going to walk into the dyno room and show you the other half of how it goes together, and listen to Darrell's hypothesis about what could have gone wrong. So it's all yours, buddy.
Okay. I've seen a lot, you guys had a lot of comments on Alan's site about what could have happened, what happened, and everything. And I wasn't going to go on there and answer every question. I thought we'd just wait till we got a video and it's easy to explain it all at once, and we'll go from there, kind of thing. So what happens when the engine comes in? Obviously it's not here, but this is a pilot bushing that I have. It goes in the torque converter snout of the crankshaft, right? And that centers the drive shaft. This is my pilot shaft that I use to center my drive. This is the drive that goes on. It bolts on like a torque converter on the Chevys. If you have a standard transmission, it's got bolt holes in here for the pressure plate, so you can bolt right on just like a pressure plate.
You're bolting it right onto the
yeah, it bolts right onto the onto the flex plate. There's threaded holes in here. You put the bolts in behind, bolted on exactly the same as you would a torque converter. You put that on, and that's how it goes on there, bolts on. So my theory on what possibly had happened, this bushing, I'm wondering if maybe there was a tiny bit of rust or dirt or something in there and it wasn't seated in all the way. This is the shaft that's on the dyno. It's very similar. So what my thought was, if this wasn't seated in properly and it was touching, if there's only like a 1.5 thou bearing clearance on one way, when I bolted it up, I wouldn't have seen a couple thou or 5 thou or whatever it would, whatever pressure, whatever distance it would have took. So we'll come on into the dyno room.
Okay, let's go in the dyno room.
I'll show you the bell housing. So by the time I got the engine in here, it's hanging on the hook. This is bolted to the engine, and I bring it in, line it up with these studs, and then I have to put a pliers in here and it turns the shaft so that it lines up with the splines on the drive plate. And then once it lines up, the engine slides back and bolts right up flush to the water brake. And like I was explaining earlier, if that was held out of the crankshaft a little bit, as I put the nuts on the back and pull this into place, I'm thinking maybe that bushing was pushing against the dyno drive, and when I tightened it up, it pushed the crankshaft forward against the thrust bearing, and that was probably what caused the issue with the bearing going out. And from
having the bearing at 3 thou may be a contributing factor too, I guess.
It may have.
If you had 6, you might have got away with it. I guess we really don't know.
Possible. Right? So, I mean, there's so many ways we could sit and hash it out all day.
We got 6 this time, by the way.
So. Great. So, yeah, the small bearing clearance, maybe that's bushing not pushed in all the way, and again, like it wouldn't have seen that little bit, a few thousandths of an inch, right? But we do know now that if we bolt it on and the engine turns over hard, first thing we should
Right
do
off
is
the
go in
bat.
here and loosen these off so the bell housing pulls away from the dyno drive, and then try and spin it again. If it spins free, then we know we have a binding issue somewhere. But from there on, that's about the only thing I could think that would cause an issue with pushing a thrust bearing. So
for anybody that's followed the series of videos we did on the failure and subsequent to that, probably know all this by now, but when I left here that day, I had no idea that it had anything to do with the dyno. We made a video explaining that we had a failure, and thank you very much for all the guys, engine builders and people with lots of experience, dyno experience. Multiple comments on the video saying, check the dyno, it could be the problem, and certainly, you know, it could have been part of the problem anyway. I guess we're not really positive.
No, I'm leaning more towards that's what happened.
Well, it's never happened to me before. Darrell's done dozens of engines for me and never even had an issue with it. I guess the other thing you learn is that you got to kind of don't leave anything for granted. You know, check everything. Something I never took an interest in. We usually drop the engine off a few days earlier. Darrell's got a few days to get it on. We get it here, have a coffee, and fire it up, and don't even think about that, right? So from now on, like you said, Darrell, if there's any issue right off the bat, that's the first thing we'll be.
Not with just your engine, with everyone's engine as well. I was explaining to Al and Alex earlier that I've had some that were like 1/8 of an inch away from the plate, and found that some of the aftermarket cranks, they weren't drilled for a pilot bearing, and the snout was actually touching the crankshaft. So I cut 1/8 of an inch off that pilot, off that input shaft, just to compensate for that problem. I've drilled crankshafts before here as well to make the clearance, so that takes quite a long process to drill the crankshaft. So I decided to modify the dyno so that I don't have to do that anymore.
Hard stuff,
Yeah, so there's things that you don't, unforeseen instances that make this happen, and I mean things
happen, and you know we learn from it. And as I said before, this applies. Experience is expensive, and if you watch videos, maybe you can gain from our experience and get it for free. So in this case, this is Wednesday. We're coming back on Saturday morning. The engine's a different engine now. It's we took advantage of the situation, sent it to a machine shop, had it bored and decked, high protecting pistons, eagle rods. It's a different engine altogether. It is not a budget build any longer. And as I always forget, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much. The latest video on our Z28 is doing great. Lots of subscribers, lots of new viewers from that one. We're really pleased about that, and we'll keep working at trying to make good videos for you. Support us by like, subscribe, comment, share, all that stuff. Comments don't just tell YouTube that somebody's paying attention to our videos. I learn from the comments, and if you're watching this video, read the comments too. You'll learn probably as much from the comments as you would from the video. Thank you for watching Gold Scratch.